Hello everyone, welcome back to the Tensei Slime light novel summary series on AniMonolith. After previous events, Kalgurio and Minutes followed Masayuki back to the Empire. Upon arrival, they were overwhelmed by waves of nobles seeking an audience. Some important, some merely curious. Refusing them risked backlash that could complicate Masayuki's accession, yet entertaining all of them was exhausting. Their mental fatigue grew rapidly. At that moment, Testarossa, Rimuru's appointed psychological stabilizer, arrived. Unconcerned with the nobles' complaints, she gathered the subjects and delivered a speech addressing the Empire's defeat and the deaths of their loved ones. Some accepted the truth, but many fell into shock, fear, and resentment. This was the moment when the demons began consuming those emotions. The plan was extremely effective, though Kalgurio felt uneasy about using demons for public reassurance. He blurted out that he did not want such rough methods applied, and immediately regretted his honesty. Yet Testarossa took no offense. She explained that because Rimuru himself had tasked her with stabilizing the Empire, she could not allow any negative influence to tarnish her master. A gentler approach was possible, she said, but it would produce mixed emotions that were harder to manage. The most effective method was to draw out all negative emotions at once, so the demons could consume them in a single sweep. Under Moss's supervision, her subordinates carried out the work perfectly, and psychological unrest across the Empire was largely eliminated. Still, Kalgurio knew Testarossa was not joking when she added that she could simply kill anyone who caused trouble. His respect and fear of both her and Rimuru deepened. Once the people had calmed down, Testarossa moved to the next step of her plan, holding a coronation ceremony for Masayuki. She believed that presenting the new emperor publicly and having him give a speech would be the fastest way to stabilize the Empire's collective morale. Masayuki was startled when he learned that he would be the one giving the speech, but he accepted the role despite his anxiety. His tears meant nothing in front of Testarossa's pleasant smile, which immediately drew Velgrin's irritation. The two women exchanged polite smiles, edged with hostility, and the pressure between them was so intense that Masayuki and Kalgurio suffered simply by standing nearby. The coronation proceeded soon after. A massive crowd filled the square before the imperial castle, waiting for the new emperor's appearance. Masayuki stood on the balcony, dignified as long as he stayed quiet. Kalgurio opened the ceremony with a speech, followed by Minutes, who explained the Empire's defeat, the death of former Emperor Rudra, and the ascension of the chosen hero Masayuki. He also announced the Empire's new alliances with Tempest and the Dwarven Kingdom, ushering in the promise of a peaceful era. However, people were confused and skeptical because Masayuki had no blood relationship to Rudra. To silence these doubts, Velgrin stepped forward. Introducing herself as the Scorched Dragon Velgrin, she invoked the Imperial Code of Ethics and declared Masayuki the rightful new emperor. Then she released an overwhelming crimson aura for everyone to see. Raising her hand toward the horizon, she commanded them to behold their new ruler. At that moment, the Flaming God Mountain erupted violently, the explosion visible even from the capital. Though some might suspect magecraft could cause such a spectacle, no one would dare tamper with a god's mountain without permission from its divine resident. To erase any remaining doubt, every volcanic bomb that fell toward the capital was repelled by Velgrin's invisible barrier, proving unmistakably that she was the Empire's guardian dragon. The crowd erupted in awe and joy, hailing the return of their divine protector and proudly accepting Masayuki as their new emperor. Although Masayuki was less known outside the Empire, within the Eastern Empire his reputation had grown to legendary proportions. Rumors spread instantly that he was Shining Masayuki, the greatest of all chosen heroes, and even someone Demon Lord Rimuru could not oppose. These exaggerated impressions fueled a wave of cheers that echoed across the capital. Masayuki did not mind the overly familiar chanting of his name, so Velgrin allowed it. Testarossa, however, was quietly irritated that the Empire believed Rimuru was inferior to Masayuki. But since she herself had designed this entire ceremony, she had no one to blame and could only endure it. With this, Masayuki was swiftly and completely accepted as the new emperor. On that day, he was officially proclaimed to the world as the emperor of the Nazca Namrium Ulmeria United Eastern Empire. After Masayuki officially ascended to the throne, the people of the empire slowly regained their vitality thanks to the newfound hope he represented. Though the pain of losing loved ones could not heal overnight, they began to move forward, and daily life gradually returned to normal. Kalgurio was relieved to see this, but his own days of rest were still far off. The moment a new emperor appeared, the nobility began to move. They constantly requested audiences to question everything, from the new political system and tax regulations to administrative structure. Calgurio was mentally exhausted and could only look to Testarossa for help. Yet she simply said, "These are the nobles of this country, but I'm sure most of them won't be a problem." He had no idea what she meant, but within a few days, the number of nobles requesting meetings suddenly dropped. This was good news, but also terrifying. Had Testarossa done something to them? Calgurio did not dare ask directly. After all, the elegant lady sipping tea before him was none other than the White Primordial, long feared by the entire empire. Unable to hold back his curiosity, he eventually visited her. Finding her calmly enjoying tea only made him more nervous. "My, why look at me with such horror? I've never done anything wrong," a line every dangerous person in history has probably said. Calgurio hurriedly denied any suspicion and thanked her for her assistance, only asking how she managed to silence the nobles so easily. Testarossa sighed lightly and explained, because even she didn't want to take all the credit for herself. First, she clarified that the empire's nobles were divided into three major factions. The warlord aristocracy, led by the Marquis family of Minutes, the group most supportive of Emperor Masayuki. The imperial aristocracy, nobles connected to the former Emperor Rudra, generally high-ranking nobles from Earl and above. The provincial lower aristocracy, loosely organized and united only by shared interests. Calgurio pointed out that the warlord faction was still chaotic due to Minutes and his younger brother being on bad terms, but Testarossa casually corrected him. No, they were just sulking. Calgurio nearly choked. So the supposed political instability was just sibling pettiness? Testarossa continued. Minutes, who should have been the leader, had pushed heavy responsibilities onto his younger brother. The younger brother, overworked and resentful, had begun to sulk. Essentially the aristocratic version of, "You go play while I work myself to death?" Shocked, Calgurio asked how she even knew something so personal. She simply smiled. "Secret, haven't you heard ignorance is bliss?" In truth, the one who discovered it was Moss, who had been working at full capacity since arriving in the Empire. He infiltrated the Marquis' mansion, found the younger brother's hidden diary, and read it. In it, the younger brother openly vented about being upset with Minutes. Moss also gathered several pieces of useful information to help reconcile the brothers and discreetly passed it along. Hearing this, Calgurio wisely decided not to question anything further. Thanks to Testarossa and Moss's overworked detective skills, the relationship between Minutes and his brother began to mend, and the nobles finally stopped causing trouble. Calgurio was already convinced that the warlord nobility had been dealt with, so he asked Testarossa about the remaining factions. She explained that the provincial aristocrats had actually been the first to come around. Their top priority was preventing famine among their people. Although stability had been restored, they still worried about the empire's future political direction. When Testarossa asked Calgurio if he understood how local nobles earned their income, he answered that they relied on crops. After keeping enough for themselves and paying taxes, they sold the surplus through merchants. Testarossa said that while this was partly correct, it was not the full picture. Calgurio was startled. How could a demon, of all beings, lecture him about economics? Testarossa revealed that the true backbone of local finances was black market trade. Calgurio was shocked, believing the empire's social system made black markets impossible. But Testarossa clarified. Although the empire preached equality, power dynamics among nobles inevitably created unfairness. Lower-ranked merchants simply could not compete with high-ranking ones. Because economic activity was restricted to nobles and the military, alternative routes for trade naturally developed. Thus, the black market emerged. Kondo, the feared intelligence officer, had been aware of all this. He deliberately tolerated black market organizations like Echidna and Cerberus because they fulfilled essential functions, supplying goods that the official market could not, preventing starvation in remote regions, and even handling foreign trade that was officially prohibited. The only activity he truly cracked down on was human trafficking. Calgurio thanked Testarossa for the explanation, finally understanding why the provincial nobles had been easy to persuade. She had promised them that free trade would be allowed under the new administration. Moreover, Rimuru's railroad project would connect the provincial cities, distributing resources more evenly instead of concentrating them near the capital. With this assurance, they pledged full support for Emperor Masayuki. The empire was advanced in science, but most of its budget had always gone into military development, making it difficult to supply distant regions. Magic and airships helped, but could not fully prevent famine in remote areas. Railroads, however, would solve this problem entirely. Calgurio was impressed by how thoroughly Rimuru and Testarossa analyzed each situation and negotiated from a position of understanding, and he resolved to change his own approach. That left only the high-ranking noble families. Calgurio assumed Testarossa already had a plan, and she did. Over the past few decades, Kondu had systematically eliminated the true villains within the empire. Only necessary underground organizations and minor troublemakers remained. To settle things with the noble families, Testarossa had arranged a meeting later that afternoon and instructed Calgurio to attend. Recognizing her overwhelming competence, he accepted without objection. And the video ends here. Let's follow the rest of the story in the next video. Thank you for listening, goodbye, and see you in the next video.